Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ron Freeman. I'm the sheriff of Forsyth County. Obviously, we're here today because we've had a major breakthrough in what we've all known as the Baby India case. Standing with me today are representatives from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, chairman of Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, the FBI, as well as members of our major crimes unit and other units within the sheriff's office. You know, this has been a almost to the date 4-year investigation. 4 years ago, we stood in this very room behind this very podium and we asked for your help because we wanted to know who could do something so incredulous to leave a baby tied up in a bag in the woods to die. And so thank you to the media, because every one of you ran the story and you ran it a lot. But unfortunately, those leads came in slow and they didn't lead to a lot of stuff that you guys tried, so thank you. Do you remember, she was found on June 6, 2019 in southeast Forsyth County, just before a significant thunderstorm hit this county. Back then, I called it divine intervention, and I truly believe that still today. If you look at everything that had to happen for this little girl to survive, for alert people to hear a sound in the woods that they thought was a wild animal, but 2 teenage girls who couldn't let it go because they thought it sounded like a baby crying. To a dad they convinced to go out in the middle of the night to check on a weird sound in the middle of the woods to discover that, to the first responding deputy, Terry Roper, being a dad like he's supposed to be, showing an infant what they should have been shown, which is compassion and care, and somebody who's going to take care of them, when the person who was supposed to be doing that wouldn't do it. This investigation has literally taken thousands of hours, and we never stopped for those 4 years. 4 years ago, I stood in this room and I told you, we will bring this person to justice. Whoever was responsible for this, we would find them and we would bring them to justice. I'll be honest with you, little did I know it was going to take 4 years. That massive investigation, those thousands of hours, we left no stone unturned. This investigation has spanned from the Northeast to the Midwest, and we utilized every significant technological and investigative technique that we could find. Now, approximately 10 months ago, with advanced DNA investigative practices and familial DNA, the Sheriff's Office was able to identify the father of baby India. That began an even more concerted investigation with a focus to determine the manner, cause, and who was responsible for leaving baby India to die in an isolated area of woods. We engaged, and I want to personally say thank you to FBI Atlanta, to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, because we asked for their help. The FBI provided countless help to us in surveillance over the last 10 months. The GBI Crime Lab provided valuable information for us, and they helped us with interviews yesterday. So I want to thank our partners, because we don't work cases like this alone. Within the past week, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit were able to utilize, again, DNA. We're able to identify the birth parent of baby India. Instrumental in the speed of that identification was Othram Labs. It's a DNA laboratory, and we have their president, Dr. David Middleman, with us here today. I want to brag on him for a second. My major crimes detectives tell me when we identified the birth parent of baby India, he himself was on the phone with our detectives after midnight that very night. So thank you for your help. Now to get to the real part of why we're here. Yesterday, Forsyth County Sheriff's Office executed multiple arrests and search warrants across Forsyth County. Nearly 40 deputies participated in the operation, and we conducted dozens of interviews, and those efforts are continuing today. Our goal was simple: identify who was responsible for trying to kill baby India. No less, no more. This investigation is not over. There's still work to be done. And again, as I said, it continues. I want to thank our district attorney, Penny Penn. She and her office were lockstep with us and with us yesterday as we worked on this investigation. And it's now their job to take this forward to a grand jury. I didn't have to motivate our team to do this. You know, every detective assigned to this case primarily happened to be a parent themselves. You don't have to work really hard when somebody tries to hurt a baby. It's easy to be motivated. While it was certainly a team effort, I'm going to recognize 3 individuals. Detective Corporal Tim Connor is a case agent, Sergeant Tyler Sexton, and Detective Lieutenant Bill Franco. They ran one of the most complex and best investigations I've seen in my 3 decades in this work. Yesterday, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office arrested Karima Jawani, 40 years old, a female of Cumming, Forsyth County, where she lives in southeast Forsyth County. DNA evidence confirms that Karima is the biological birth parent of baby India. She cooperated with detectives during the investigation. She has been charged with criminal attempt to commit murder, cruelty to children in the first degree, aggravated assault, reckless abandonment, and other charges. How a parent, and I happen to be one too, can do such a callous thing is both incomprehensible to all of us, and it's infuriating. I'm dumbfounded by any reasoning that could be there and how someone can have the ability to leave their own child to die. While we're not going to discuss motives or details of her interview, as this case is pending prosecution, and that is the most important thing to me, little can explain how this happened, and no motive can justify that decision. You know, Georgia has a safe harbor law. Many of you have seen that. First 30 days, you can leave a child at a hospital, a police station, a fire station, a sheriff's office, and you can't get charged. In this case, Ms. Jawani made no effort to leave this child not only under safe harbor law, but at any place this child could be found. This child was tied up in a plastic bag and thrown into the woods like a bag of trash. I can't understand that. I truly wish I could. I struggle. But I don't know how you can understand that. It literally is one of the saddest things I have ever seen. Yesterday, Deputy Sheriff Terry Roper, who discovered and rescued baby India, was one of the arresting deputies of Karima Jawani. It seemed only fitting that deputy who first showed, as I said earlier, baby India, what a parent and a human being should act like, how someone is supposed to protect and comfort an infant, got the privilege of arresting that person. Now, I took a little executive privilege because the handcuffs she wore to jail were mine, and the case detective, Tim Connor, is the one that put them on her. I told you 4 years ago we would find them, and my cuffs would be on them, and they were. Evidence indicates that this birth likely took place inside of a motor vehicle. Detectives have developed information on this and are currently working on locating that vehicle and have leads on it. Additional evidence reveals that Karima Jawani drove alone for a significant period of time after the birth of baby India with the child in the car, and she made no effort to leave this child at any safe place where there was any remote possibility of her being located, until she decided to tie the baby in a plastic bag and throw it into the woods to die. This is an incredible case with the strangest of circumstances from the beginning to the end. Evidence also reveals a history of hidden and concealed pregnancies and surprise births in Ms. Jawani's history. Additional evidence indicates that she had known of this particular pregnancy for a period of time, a fairly considerable period of time, and went to extremes to conceal this pregnancy. Interviews of family, friends, and medical professionals corroborate the history of these concealed pregnancies and, for lack of better description, surprise births. While detectives, all of us, were surprised by the facts of this case, the evidence supports it. Simply and horribly, it is what it is. Trace evidence collected at the scene where baby India was abandoned also supports the likelihood that Karima Jawani was alone at the time of disposing of baby India. You know, despite this inconceivable criminal act, I think there's a good story to tell here. Baby India is now prospering. She's happy and healthy. When those who were supposed to do their best did their worst to her, Forsyth County stepped up in a big way. We had literally hundreds, if not thousands. We wish they were leads, but citizens calling in asking how they could help when she was first found. I'll foster her. I'll adopt her. My wife and I said we'd foster her. I had sheriffs and police chiefs calling me and telling me they would adopt her, wanting to make sure she was taken care of. You know, when a biological parent wouldn't do what they're supposed to do, Forsyth County surrounded this little girl with love, care, and prayers and lifted her up the way it's supposed to be. I was telling my team, I said, man, isn't it going to be cool to watch this little girl grow up and see her do some great things in spite of these beginnings. That's the gist, ladies and gentlemen. A biological parent, I have trouble with the word mother, who inexplicably, intentionally left her newborn infant to die. It's a case for prosecution. There's no justification. But I'm really, really proud of the work that these men and women in this room and behind me put in, because this case needed to be solved and this community needed to know what happened to baby India. With that, we'll be glad to take some questions. Please understand two kind of hit points here. We're not going to discuss current status of baby India. She is happy and healthy in a safe place, but confidentiality is paramount in this case where it comes to her. So we're not going to discuss her. And there is some evidence because of the prosecution we're going to be hesitant to speak to at this point in the case. But other than that, the detectives and people behind me and myself will be glad to take some questions. Yes, sir.
With Atlanta News First, you said that there's evidence that reveals she has a history of surprise births. Are there any indications that she had done this very same thing to other newborns in the past?
We inquired about that and looked into that, and thus far, while the statement I made was accurate, we have not found additional acts like this. We've not discovered any other criminal acts would probably be the best answer for that. Okay.
Sheriff Deidre Dukes, Fox 5 Atlanta. Could you just talk about this feeling that I can see on your faces and all those gathered here today, having resolved this case to finally have an arrest?
Deidre, I've been doing this for 33 years. And I truly can't think of one that I wanted more. You know, people get it. Look, if you're a parent, you get it. You really get it if you're a parent, right? This innocent baby girl who needed everything, right? They need everything from the time they're born. Got put in a bag and left as a bag of trash to die. And so, yeah, I'll be very blunt. Every one of us behind here have said, we wanted this one. We wanted this resolved, and we wanted to find the person responsible. But we did that also as professional law enforcement officers, because you didn't know the facts till you knew the facts. Unfortunately, the facts in this case reveal no mitigation, right? No explanation just a really, really heinous act. So I think we're all pleased, but I thought I would be madder than I am, but I'm actually probably a little sadder because I can't understand it. I think we're better than that in humanity.
That
Yes, sir.
starts with the land use first. You said that you tracked down the father through DNA 10 months ago. Can you kind of talk about what happened in the last 10 months that took so, I don't want to say took so long, but the amount of time that it took to track the mom? Can you speak to that time frame?
Without going into our investigative techniques, yeah, not everybody has a DNA profile. That's in some database somewhere, some accessible somehow. And once we identified the father, as you can imagine, we had an investigation that was this big. Once we identified the father, that gave us a really focal point. But not knowing the facts of the case, not knowing who was responsible for this criminal act against baby India, that began an intensive surveillance investigation, a lot of background investigation, a lot of additional information needed to be sought. And it wasn't until last week that the break of identifying the birth parent happened. So we were working it hot and heavy for the last 10 months, but we needed one additional piece of information to make us feel that we had enough to go forward with criminal prosecution, and that was the DNA identification of the birth parent.
And that birth parent, is she from Forsyth County?
The birth parent is Karima Jawani, who's under arrest and sitting in my jail.
Right, but is she from this area?
She lives in southeast Forsyth County for the last couple of years.
So you mentioned, I'll go back into 11 Alive News. You mentioned this investigation took you all over from north to west. How did it end up in the Northwest, and what research did that have to do with finding it?
Lieutenant Franco, you want to? I'm going to let Lieutenant Franco.
So, I mean, Lieutenant Franco, Major Crimes Unit. Basically, we're looking for the links, and we're putting the pieces together, and that took us to several different places throughout the country, and then eventually brought us back here to Forsyth County.
Any elaboration on why or how? Like, was the suspect living there? Did they move back? Anything like that?
No, they were here. Thank you.
Sheriff Michelle Hall, Forsyth County News.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you allowed to say, did the biological father know that there was even a baby?
There is no evidence at this point that the father was aware of either the pregnancy or the abandonment of baby India. And we have looked thus far exclusively in depth at that. And that's why I mentioned earlier that there is a history of unknown or concealed pregnancies, maybe both. And that's still under investigation at this point, not the father per se, but the unknown and concealed pregnancies as we validate additional information. But we've corroborated that in multiple interviews yesterday, in multiple statements made yesterday. And so at this point, we have zero reason to believe the father was aware of the pregnancy or of the birth and abandonment of baby India.
One more question goes back to 11 Alive, and I know you probably mentioned this a little, but did this young lady give any indication of why she did this?
That goes to motive. And I will say that she cooperated, and there was, but at this point, due to the pending prosecution, we're not going to talk about motivations. And I hope you respect that, but we do have some information. But I will say this again, for God's sake, tell me any explanation on the, and I know that you're not asking it, any explanation on the face of this earth that can justify doing that to a child. Because it don't exist. Deidre, you had?
Sheriff, can you tell us if the suspect had any children living with her at the time of her arrest? If she did, where those children are now?
There are additional children. We have contacted our partners at the Department of Family and Children's Services and asked them to evaluate and put a safety plan in place. Ms. Jawani is being held without bond at the Forsyth County Jail. And so that becomes a DFACS issue for them to evaluate the home or the current standing of those other children. But there were additional children, Deidre.
And can you provide the number of children, ages, or age range?
I'm going to be very cautious of identifying children who are innocent and had nothing to do in this heinous criminal act, but they range from school age to near adult, and I'll just leave it at that. Y'all are too easy.
And Sheriff, I know you said there is no explanation for this kind of act, but could you just speak again to someone who may be out there who maybe don't know, like, look, there are other options?
Oh, one, thank you. Look, there's 1,000 different ways. We talked about the safe harbor law and being able to drop off at those locations we talked about. And I'm sure, and I'm asking for you, our friends in the media, please push that out there, right? Because we might stop this from happening somewhere else. But for God's sake, don't leave a baby in such a position. And I want to make a very clear difference. There's one thing of abandoning a child. You've covered many cases. We've seen cases, been involved in cases where a baby's been abandoned, left on a doorstep, left at a business, left in a parking lot, where it was clear that even though it might not have complied with the safe harbor law, someone had something in their mind that this child would likely be found. That is not this case. This child was wrapped up to suffocate in a plastic bag, thrown 20 yards in the woods in an isolated area with one house nearby it. That family happened to arrive home when they weren't supposed to, and happened to go back outside because it was going to rain to empty their car when they had earlier decided they were going to do it the next morning. That's divine intervention. This baby's supposed to be here. So I want to make very clear the difference in someone who's struggling, someone who doesn't know what to do, someone who's in an emotional distress and abandons a child because they don't know what else to do, but took some effort at least to find some safety and care for that child, versus somebody who tried to kill a child. They're not the same thing. Tom?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Oh, sorry.
Appreciate you.
Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much. Thank you for your help again 4 years ago. And let's hope we never see each other for something like this again. All right. All right. All right. Thank you.
Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman and the case surrounding baby India, they did make an announcement that they've made an arrest nearly 4 years later. The baby's mother, Karima Jawani, was arrested yesterday. She's now facing multiple charges, including criminal attempt to commit murder, first-degree cruelty to children, aggravated assault, reckless abandonment. And all of this stems back in 2019. A family says that they heard a baby crying in the woods near their home. They picked up the phone and called police. Police got out to the woods and they found a newborn baby wrapped in a plastic bag, left for dead. The police were able to get that baby to safety. Sheriff Freeman telling us today that baby India is happy and healthy. He's not giving any updates about the baby's location for security purposes, but we do want to touch on the investigation here. He said about 10 months ago, Sheriff's Office identified the father of baby India with help from the FBI and GBI. Within the past week, Forsyth County Major Crimes Unit, well, they identified the mother. And yesterday, he says that about 40 officers went throughout Forsyth County. They made multiple arrests and multiple interviews, and that's what brought them to the arrest of Jawani, who is now in Forsyth County custody. So we're going to be digging into this case on later editions of 11 Alive News at 5, 6, and 11 p.m. We do know that Jawani is expected to virtually appear in court tomorrow at 10 a.m. We will be there, and we will bring that to you as well. For more information and to listen to the chilling phone call from when that family found baby India, you can actually listen to that right now at 11alive.com. We'll see you later.